Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to NeoSystems webinar, Costpoint 7 Extensibility, your bridge to the rest of the world. My name is Brian Giblin, and I'll be your host today. Costpoint 7 Extensibility. We've all read the brochures by now, the literature, where it lets you add fields, validate fields, but really, what does it mean? How does it help you? And what that does is it allows you to add the fields you needed for other applications. It allows you to validate them, make a field required, make other fields that already exist, make them required. And this will help you to extend Costpoint, your bridge to your other applications, and in fact, the rest of the world. Quick look at our agenda today. After we get done with the introduction, we'll get into the business challenges that many of you are facing, and then get into extensibility, what it is and how it can help you with those business challenges. We'll go into a demonstration and really let you see how extensibility works, how you set it up, what it can do for you, some things we've done with it, and follow that up by getting into some resources, not just resources that can help you with extensibility, but more broadly with Costpoint 7 in general. We'll take your questions and answers at the end, but if you have your questions, when they come up, just type them into the questions box, and we'll be sure to get to them at the end. A very brief discussion about NeoSystems. We provide strategic back-office services. These include accounting, human capital management, and IT. IT includes hosting. In particular, we host Costpoint 7 for many clients here. We also have consulting, which serves as an umbrella for these services. We do upgrades for Costpoint 7, as well as create extensibility packages for people. We have 125 employees, and currently in our secure private cloud, we have 445 companies supporting over 26,000 employees. What I'd like to do now is learn a little bit more about you. So we have a poll question. And what is it you're hoping to get out of today's webinar? Are you looking at how to create extensibility packages? How best to use extensibility? Maybe you're curious about some of its limitations, or maybe there's another reason. If you do have another reason, please take a moment and write it into the question box so we have a sense of what you're hoping to get out of today's webinar. Try to use this to tailor our presentation as we go through it. 2, 1, 0. Most of you are mostly interested in how best to use extensibility. And that's what we're going to focus on today then, how best to use it, what you can do with it, how you go about adding fields, and what that means to you, and how it'll help you to do your business and use Costpoint more effectively as you run your company. Now I'm going to turn things over to Bruce Marovic. Bruce is the leading expert in extensibility for Costpoint 7. He was there bringing the first company live on Costpoint 7 as part of that team. He also has built 50 integration packages for companies as they tried to connect Costpoint 7 and Costpoint out to other software applications. His experience spans over 10 years with Deltek products. Let's turn it over to Bruce.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Bruce Marovic. I'm a former Deltek employee. Now I'm working with NeoSystems. My expertise is in the world of integration. I've been a former application architect and a database administrator and also a developer of software systems. I've been doing IT since '83, but as Brian said, for the last 10 years I've been working with Deltek products. So let's look at the presentation outline, what we're going to go over today. First, we're going to talk about business challenges. And one of the reasons extensibility is very powerful is that out-of-the-box Costpoint has a certain set of rules and a certain look and feel. Those things can be augmented with the extensibility, and we can take a look at a specific problem and then solve it with extensibility. We'll take a look at those solutions using extensibility to solve these business problems and challenges that we have. And then we'll talk about the Costpoint tools as well as a tool that we need for modifying any reports with the latest version of Costpoint. We'll talk about the extensibility limitations and go through those in detail, because there's certain things that the extensibility product does not do today. And then we'll even take a step forward and look at where the extensibility roadmap takes us, and so our future extensibility opportunities and where we can move forward in the future. The other thing we'll talk about is developer requirements. This is critical, because a lot of times people think that if you have somebody who has a Java or a database background, they can just start doing extensibilities or working on web services and things like that. And it does still require a strong background with the Deltek products and understanding how procedures and works. And we'll go through that in some detail. And then I'll do an overview of the designer itself, and we'll take a look at that. So we'll start with the business challenges. Again, this is from my experience and what I've been doing for probably the last year and a half, 2 years with Costpoint 7. You need to connect another system to Costpoint. A lot of times what happens is Costpoint's playing a role, and that role may only be a centralized focus, and then there may be some shared services, and so you need to connect the two systems. This is done through integration, but in a lot of cases you would like to be able to see the data from the other system and be able to see Costpoint data on the same screen. This can be done with extensibility. Another thing that came up is we had a company that had 10,000 employees, 10,000 plus employees, and they're trying to find the right employee. And they will go through an extensibility that resolves that. The other thing is from all the way back to the beginning of Costpoint, customizations were being built. Those customizations need to be ported to Costpoint 7, and in many cases the extensibility process will be able to help you move that forward and get your customizations into an extensibility within the new Costpoint 7 model. In many ways, Costpoint 7 out of the box has a certain look and feel, and if you need a way to change that, customize that, the extensibility is a great method for doing that. You can tailor it to have it look your way for your company or your enterprise. So with Costpoint 7 and extensibility, we can solve many of your business challenges. We're able to have data shared in Costpoint, and you get the right look and feel for your business users so that they can get their work done in a very efficient way. And this also allows us to keep changing Costpoint as your business changes. The first thing, as we get through the demonstrations, I'm going to show you how to select just your projects. So in many cases, if there's many projects and you're the project manager, you don't have to remember every single project number. You know what your name is, and so you, as the project manager, you can put your name in, and then it'll just select the projects that are assigned to you. Also, this towards the Costpoint workflow or workforce setup, we able to separate, and if you have thousands of employees, then basically you can go and select just engineers if you need them, or if you need just clerks for a project. That way it's a lot faster than you trying to find the employee ID for each of those employees. You can also create new employee types, such as a material handler, so you can give a new way of looking at the employee pool and be able to pull out specific individuals, so you're not going through a whole population of 10,000 to find someone. You're actually pulling out just the people that are assigned to the material handler role. You can also create new policies. So, and this is a huge thing, because you can change Costpoint by adding an additional rule in front of the rules that runs out of the box technology to do, say, check for a special rule to make sure that your project starts with a certain set of characters. Many times there's a way to categorize your, looking at the project number itself, you can kind of figure out what you need to do, but now this allows you to enforce that so that you're not building your projects outside the model that your business enterprise requires. Many of the things that I do are from very large systems like SAP, PeopleSoft, Oracle, and connecting those to Costpoint and Costpoint back and forth. It's great to have a place in Costpoint where now you can see that SAP, this PeopleSoft, and the Oracle values and be able to see them on the same screen as the Costpoint data that's there. And then if you do have to create a different type, we have a different security type, or you need a different employee type for your business, you can do that and then turn around your selections so that they match correctly. These are the tools for what Costpoint has today that allows us to make changes in process. The very top is content management. That's basically the document sharing, and it allows it to be able to tie back into Costpoint directly. This may be a future webinar. We may go over and show that. Around in the middle, there's the integration console processing, so this is where you can have other systems connect to Costpoint, or the Deltek connector process connect to Costpoint through these web services. But the area that we're going to talk about today is extensibility. The blue box basically shows that we're working with a designer that is creating methods within a certain perspective. It's outside of the out-of-the-box Costpoint. So basically you're isolated from any hot fixes or service packs that are coming in for Costpoint, because this basically is sitting on the outside of it and is brought into Costpoint at the time Costpoint is executed. Now there are two caveats to that, and I will discuss that during the demo. So we're looking at Costpoint 7.0.1. We can basically change some reports. I'm using an example. I've changed checks for a group, and I've also changed some material reports to add a barcode. So I will demonstrating that today. Adding additional elements to your screen, this is going to be that material handler. I'll show you how that process was there. And then we'll look at functionality where you're changing a method to edit a default or a business rule. Here we'll look at it from the perspective of narrowing the scope of both for the material handler and also for the project manager and the PLC piece, which is going to be our filtering. We'll also talk about additional functions that can be added, and this can be done either with a Java class or it can be done with a stored procedure. And it allows you to, at the front of the process or the end of a process, be able to do certain edits. And then also, if data is in the out-of-the-box solution isn't giving you the data that you're looking for, you can have an additional process run after that will change it. The other piece of the extensibility framework allows us to do emails. And so any process within Costpoint, we can have it email the status. We can make these emails be more informational and let you know that certain pieces have executed within Costpoint. So if you're trying to do a workflow, this might be able to tie that in. Some of the limitations, one of the biggest ones for right now in the state we're in, is you cannot change core code. So everything, Costpoint stays the same. And so what you have to basically think about is you're going to be changing, you're going to put edits and defaults and processes in front of a core code call, or you're going to have processes execute after it. So you're not able to physically change this. Example, if someone asked me if I could change the revenue formula, that would be changing core code, and I cannot do that at this time. And right now, there are lots of these integration pieces that I have in my world that I would love to have part of Costpoint, and I have to come up with solutions that allow people to go in and change crosswalk tables, handle scheduling, things like that, which are all data methods. All those things, I cannot add a new window or a new method to Costpoint at this time in 7.01. Some of the future extensibility opportunities, the doors are going to open. 7.1 on the roadmap has us being able to add new processes and methods. This is great because this is we're able to go ahead and physically add code that's going to execute that may call another set of code and be able to make this more robust. We can add custom screens into there. That's that crosswalk example I was talking about before, our source to target, so that we make sure that we have a place, if you have an issue with a transformation, we can actually get that handled within a screen in Costpoint. Same thing with handling the schedules, as I was saying earlier. Also, anytime there's a failure, a restart, or a notification, the execution and starting and running of that process can actually be created in a future version. We'll be able to add processes, gears that actually hit the process that runs your integrations. And the other thing we'll be able to do is change core code. There's a caveat to that, is that anytime there's hot fixes come in for that core code is not going to will get fixed, but your new method that you created from the core code won't. So it'll be your responsibility to keep those things in sync. The other thing that's really, really interesting is that we have lots of database elements within Costpoint, and creating these data imports, a business-centric method that does all the business editing and makes sure that the data is good before it actually goes into Costpoint. We can create these new imports. Previously, these were called preprocessors, so create new preprocessors. In the Costpoint 7 lingo, it's imports, so create some new imports. And this is the one that's exciting to me because, I mean, I was working with Costpoint 4, and I had trouble with the tax model, with all the tax tables, and it did not go deep enough into the local jurisdictions. And now I can create it with this future vision. I'll be able to create a call to Vertex, send geographic information, get back the local tax rates, and apply all those and record them and save them within Costpoint for auditing purposes. The developers have to have a certain set of skills, and those skills mean they have to understand about Costpoint security. They have to understand the difference between an action and a method. These processes are very, you will see as we go through the tool and look at the tool, it's very, very important that you understand all that. Also, you have to understand that we're going to be creating these external tables. Those tables are going to have to tie through the standard Costpoint database objects, so you'll have to understand Costpoint database objects and relationships. There's two methods for running that process before and after any of the processes. You can do them as a stored procedure, or you can do them as a Java class, so they'll have to either have a good background in stored procedure development, and there is some limitations to that, and they could have and/or Java class development, which allows you to create new Java classes to execute these errors, the messages, defaults, and the business rules. They also need access to the Costpoint web server. That's where the tools are that we use to change and modify Costpoint using extensibility. And then the other thing is they'll need Eclipse for creating and compiling and creating these Java methods. Also for any of the BERT, which is the new reports within Costpoint. So basically with 7.01, we're able to change the reports themselves, and the Eclipse BERT tool is how we can actually do that and get that done with extensibility. And then the last thing is that you've done all of this. There is the database wizard. We use this for deployment. We create packages. Those packages can be sent to your system administrator, and then they can go into the database wizard and deploy them to your different systems. So I'll give you a quick overview of the Extensibility Designer. We're able to create extensibility projects and extensibility units. This is basically the packaging within the Extensibility Designer that allows us to separate these things. It's good to have that because that way you can import, and from a testing perspective, you can separate it so that you're actually testing the extensibility and make sure you approve it before you move it on. If you put them all under the same project, then you have a lot more testing to do. The area where we can do methods is at the action level, which is your gears. We could change reports, any of the reports within Costpoint. We can also do record set manipulation and get that process done, which also allows us to do more defaulting, more lookups and things of that nature. We can do screen manipulation, which allows us to add additional screen elements to this, or take advantage of other elements in Costpoint that are not on those screens and then tie them into the screens themselves. We'll look at the fact that you'll be creating and referencing new extensibility tables. These tables is where the data will be stored that has the specific extensibility data that's not in the core Deltek. And then we'll look at how creating the HTML and the scripts so that you're prepped for doing the packaging step, and then after that the deployment. And then we'll take a quick look at Eclipse for BERT. We'll look at a BERT report. Here's a quick screenshot of the designer, and we'll see more of this in the demo. And here's a quick screenshot of the BERT tool for Eclipse BERT tool. So the demonstration I'm going to go through is we're going to take a look at some standard functionality, because that's basically the out-of-the-box functionality. Then we'll go ahead and we'll enable these extensibilities that I've written. And then we'll see the selection of your projects. We'll see this being able to select specific employees, which will speed up your process. And then we'll take a look at the new element screen change, which happens to allows us to limit and control a new element for employees called material handler. And we'll see how that Costpoint's been extended. So we'll go to the demonstration portion now. Basically, this is I'm logged into the application server, and I have several icons here to the right. The first one is Costpoint 7. This is a login for Costpoint 7. It allows me to get in, take a look at Costpoint 7. It's nice to have because then if I make changes within an extensibility, I can go in and take a look and see if they've met the requirements or if I have to make any other tweaks to it. Then we have the designer itself, the Extensibility Designer. This will bring up the designer piece, which we saw earlier in that screenshot. And then I do a lot of work with Costpoint integration, so I have the integration console here also. Because again, my world is the Deltek connector, extensibility, and integration. That's how it all pulls together. We will be going into this one today. Maybe this will be a future webinar. And then here's Eclipse, and we'll go and take a look at that for reporting. And then, as I said before, as soon as you've got everything packaged from the designer, you can go into the DB Wizard, and the DB Wizard will then allow us to import that into, or deploy that into your Costpoint, and then you can then start accessing it. We'll talk about security, the profiles, and tying those profiles to the extensibility units. So we'll just go into Costpoint 7 first. And I have to log in. And as I said before, we're going to be looking at projects, project setup, project labor, manage employee workforce. The out-of-the-box technology, I would come in here and I would try to find my project. The only choice I have is to put in some portion of the project name. I've been saying, there are several different projects in here, but imagine if this number was 10,000, it would be difficult to try to find the project you're looking for. So this would bring back the projects. I would then pick a project, and then down here I would get all of the employees. My choices for lookup is if I knew their name, I knew their ID, or I knew their home org, I could select on that. And so the out-of-the-box technology makes basically, I have to be this could be 10,000 employees when I'm trying to find one specific or two specific employees. So we're going to add an extensibility to allow us to make these searches much more succinct. So let me go to the employee for a moment. So this is the out-of-the-box employee Costpoint. And while I'm here, I'm going to talk about this because when I first wrote this extensibility, there was no product interface. This is for the shop floor application, and so there were a certain number of tabs here, and so when I said you're secure that the hotfixes come in and they won't impact your extensibility, that's mostly true. But in this instance, what I did is I needed to go change the tab ID, and we'll see that in a minute. My tab will go right here. But right now there is no out-of-the-box material handler, and that would be the one thing. And if you use this space right here, and then the developers at Deltek use that space, you have to be aware of it, and then be able to move it over to some place, some portion of the screen that's not being used. So basically, this is the material. If we go look at, we're going to go to materials, and then receiving. This is where the requirement was. Go to do the receiving right here. They didn't want to search through all of these employees. They only wanted to see the employees that were material handlers. And a step beyond that, they wanted to just be able to see a list right here of the employees, and we'll see that functionality in a moment. So these are the things we're going to be impacting today. All right. So it all starts with going to each of these windows. I should stay on that window. I could be on any window, actually. What we need to do is get the actual name of the method in Costpoint. So here in this employee one, if I go under Help, About Costpoint, we'll have some new elements here. Basically, we've got manage employee information. This is the information I need to do the lookup within extensibility. So this is where I was saying you really have to understand the methods, and I would get this and I would do my change. You also notice that there's an extensibility applied over here, and it's a no. So right now we do not have any extensibilities turned on to this process, but these are things that if you have a developer, they'll have to see this, and then your users will have to know this, because you'll ask the question, hey, is this extensibility unit applied? Because this could be two things. This could be that it is applied, and then the other piece of the puzzle is they may not be in the profile, which is where we're going to go to next. So there is two new screens here. It's under System Administration, Workspace Customization. There's Manage Extensibility Units and the Manage the User Interface Profiles. In the profiles for this test today, what I've done is I've gotten two groups. I have one called Manager, which handles the workforce controls, and then I have another one called Material Handler, which handles the material handler setup and restrictions. So you can see you can have two methods tied to this because they are basically one cohesive unit. So down here is where the people are assigned. So this is where you'd either have the physical user ID or the user group that has authority to see that anything that's assigned to these two groups up above. And if I go to extensibility units and highlight here, I see that there are two of them, one for the project manager lookup and the other one for the employee lookup, but both of them are not active. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them both active, and then I'm going to go to the material handler, and same thing, I have one for setting the material value, the handler value, and one that's going to do the restriction, so I'm going to make both of those active. So if you're having issues with extensibility, you can turn this on and off from this screen right here. All right. And sometimes with caching, I have, I'm going to go ahead and log out and log back in just to make sure I'm getting the right values back into Costpoint. So now I'm back in Costpoint. If I go to Projects, Setup, Project Labor, and the Workforce, there's two things I can do. I can go under my query and see now that project manager name is there. That wasn't there before in the process, so I had to get off all 12 projects. The other thing is if I go up under Help, about Costpoint, the value changed for extensibility to a Y down here on the far right. So that means this is using an extensibility unit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a search. As you saw before, that again, it wasn't as many, but imagine if you had 1,000 employees. So I'm going to look for all of the employees that are associated with Bush, and I get back one project. So it makes it much faster for Tara to come in here and find the projects that are associated. Down here, there's 50 employees, and then but basically I'm interested in only the ones that have a PLC of engineer. This, as I said before, could be clerk, could be, and then basically here now I'm only seeing the two. So you can get very quick turnaround. This could definitely save lots of time for the user who is doing the setup of employee workforce. And again, I've only done it in this instance. This same kind of technology could be added to any other screen within Costpoint. So I'm just going to leave that up, but I'm going to go to the employees. And now I see there's a new tab here called Materials, and so I've gained a screen here which shows the material handler process. I'm going to run a query. There's 54 of them. I'm going to run this, change this back to form so it's easier for us to see. And the first one is not a material handler, and the second person is, and the third person is, and I've only set one person to be a material handler. So if you remember, we are in materials, and receiving of purchase order receipts. And now if I do a lookup here, it's only going to show William, and this happens to be based on the employee ID. So if I know that, I could start the beginning of the employee ID and only the employee IDs that are necessary, so they can check this. Plus, this is also being validated, so they can't put in one that's not a material handler. So it's a very nice process. So that's the end result. So we looked at the out-of-the-box situation. We've seen several extensibilities applied and their value. Well, let's take a look at how we did that. So I'm going to go into the Extensibility Designer. Again, you're going to have to establish someone as being a extender. And in this instance, because I'm working on, I don't have an ID here, I've used CP Superuser. And I'm logging in. And as you saw before, this is the layout for the Extensibility Designer. The projects I've created so far are located here. And so you can see this was the one for the project management one, so we'll open that up. It has two extensibility units, one of them handling the manager name lookup and the other one doing the employee lookup. If we go look at the material handler, there are two. There's just one. And then, let's see. All right. So basically, there's just one here, and then we can go in and take a look at the first one. So I'm going to go back in here. One of the things I wanted to go over is that you can basically get to any of these. So you can look at all of the applications that are within Costpoint. You can look at all the modules. You can do all the record sets. And this comes back. So you can see it's basic. You have a filter above here where it allows you to select those. And some instances you need to go to the tree. So there's a tree object that basically holds those record sets. So you go to the tree first. And then the one that, these are the gears. So this is all the actions that can get executed. And as I said before, you can now also change these reports, add additional data fields in here that will then be able to pass to BERT. So we're going to go back into Manager, and we're going to take a look at Manager here. So I have to go all the way down to the record set that has the change, and then basically go up to this Edit object above here. So we can see what's happened here. Here's the standard out-of-the-box SQL that's pulling the data for the record set. And what I've done is I've added the manager name, and I've tied it to the project ID. The project ID that's coming back in this object is the one I'm tying to it, so this will bring back the manager name for each of the projects that are being selected. At this point, I have that process. I have to say it's where it is on the client and the fact that it's there so that it will pop up on the screen so we can see it. And then in the presentation, there's a tool down here where I can go and see the form as it is and then make adjustments to it. This is important because one of the things I had to do is take care of the query order. So I had it added over here as a query object, and then I moved it into this so it's actually part of the query design. So on here, I had to check this include query button right here. So I take this, I make all these changes. I go ahead and hit verify to make sure there's no issues with it. I'll go ahead and then do an apply and an OK, which I've already done. And it's now basically ready to be tested. We'll look at packaging in a minute. So I'm going to take us to the next one. And here, same idea. We're just basically pulling the PLCs from the employee lab info, grabbing the most effective date PLC. So again, you have to understand how the data structure works within Costpoint. So we've added that piece of the puzzle. And in the description, we had to go ahead and make sure that those were on the client also. And then also, and that they were checked to be included in the query. And the same idea, then I had to make sure that there aren't any errors. And so basically do the apply and the OK, and then the extensibility unit was in place. Now let's look at this one. This one's going to be adding an element to the screen. So again, here I'm connecting it to another table where I'll be storing that whether you're a material handler or not, also tied to their employee ID. And then on the extensibility material handler, I have to basically make sure it is editable, and I'm making this required, so you have to put a value in. And if they don't put a value in, we're basically going to be sending it to no. So all of these decisions get made within the extensibility, and then the title that's going to be displayed on the screen. And then I can do the form designer. When that happens, there's some block content you have to say, and then here I can go to materials, and if I wanted to move this, there's a handy tool to move it to wherever I want it to be, and then all I need to do is do a save, and it will save it back to the process. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and close this. And the last one was the PO receipts. We were looking at that restriction. In the restriction, I'm not restricting it by anything here, but what I'm trying to do in the actual process, if I go find the material handler, and go to the extensibility, we'll see down here what I've done is tied it and said I want to have it validated against the employees and make sure that the employee lookup is there. I've augmented the SQL statement so that it's looking for specifically material handlers, being a Y. And then up above here I have it set in the query, and this is going to error out if someone tries to pick something that isn't a material handler. So same idea, basically adding the structures and putting them in place. So this basically covers the, and again, I'm sure you have additional questions. Feel free to contact Brian or myself, and we can set something up and we can walk through some of these things in more detail. But as soon as I've done this and I've got everything where I need it to be, then what I have to do is create a script or export the script, because there's lots of metadata that's being changed and tied to the Java class files and jars that are being created. So I execute this step, and it's going to go ahead and create all of the values that I need in a SQL statement, which then I can actually package. And so on these processes here, I can go ahead, if it needs to be built, I can do the build, and then I can do the pack. And it's going to go ahead and create a package that's going to create a zip file that can then be picked up by the DB wizard. So I'll close out of this. So that basically covers the basic functionality here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I have that process built, so now in the wizard we have two new functions here, one called deploy extensibilities, one called remove extensibilities. I'll go to the deploy one. You got to pick the system you're deploying to. This has several different systems tied to this instance of Costpoint 7 application, and I'm going to be doing my work within the demo Costpoint 7 database. I'm going to go find my extensibilities. This happens to be where the hot fixes are. I have it one level above. I go find my extensibility, select it, and then basically do run here, and what it'll do is it will actually deploy it. But it's already deployed, so I don't need to do that. If I needed to remove an extensibility, I would go through the same process, pick the extensibility, and then do a remove, and that will take it away from Costpoint 7. The other tool I was telling you about was the Eclipse. Eclipse has two functions. It does the reporting piece of it, so it allows us to make changes to the reports that are within Costpoint. So now if you have Cognos pieces that you have because you couldn't actually change the reports in Costpoint, well now with Costpoint 7.01 you can, and then you can pick a report and make it be what your business process needs. This one was the customer needed a barcode added to their reports, and so this barcode can then be read by an optical reader and used in their data storage method outside of Costpoint. And so we went ahead and made that changes with the Eclipse process. Any new objects can then be found and added to the screen as long as we change the record set that's feeding it, and then add that additional data. And that basically completes my demonstration of extensibility. So in summary, what we did is we took a look at several problems and resolved them. One of them was how to narrow a search on the workforce by the project manager, which we solved with an extensibility. Narrow the scope of going through 10,000 employees to be able to look them up by their PLC, or it could be their GLC, depending on their business logic, or maybe some new variable created through extensibility. And we looked at it from a PLC perspective and were able to set that. The other one was we were able to set a new category of employee called material handler, and then limit anywhere the material handler was being selected so that whoever's in charge of doing those processes don't have to go ahead and look through 10,000 employees to find the material handler. And we were able to add a new element to a screen, and we saw that functionality. We talked about some future versions. We can actually add new screens, we can add new processes, we can add all these things when we get to that layer in the roadmap when Costpoint gets there and extensibility gets there. This will also allow us to be our one-stop workplace portal, and that portal then will allow us to have one place for the users to go versus them having to log into System X, System Y, and Costpoint. We talked about the developer requirements. They have to understand Costpoint, the data model, the security model, understand the methods, how that works with actions and processes. Also, they should have some database knowledge to running stored procedure, because that's one method to doing pre and post changes through extensibility. And also Java for if they want to do a Java class instead of a stored procedure. They also need to understand how to basically have access to this application server, because that's where the tools are located, and also be able to deploy those or pass along a package to whoever's doing the implementation. We looked at the designer. We talked through all the steps of the designer and looked at the actions and processes, opened each of those. I mean, a lot of this is, and then the demonstrations were going over those business processes. So I believe that covers it for me. Brian?
That's great, Bruce. And looking at it, I can see where by adding fields and being able to validate the fields, it's going to save users time. It's going to lead to more accurate data being in Costpoint. And also by adding those fields, you'll be able to have the data there available to other applications so that we can continue that bridge and extend Costpoint beyond the island that it is today. So with that in mind and what we learned from this webinar, I want to do another poll and look at what people want to do with extensibility. What are you interested in doing with it? Are you looking at adding fields? Are you looking at doing customizations? Are you looking at integrating with third-party applications? Please select all that apply to you so we can get a sense of what people are looking to do with extensibility. Results are flying in. I'll give you another 3 seconds. 2, 1. Show the results. This is what I expected. It really, with such a new tool, with so many things that you can do with it, a lot of people are looking at doing a lot of different things. third-party applications, integrating with them did edge out everyone else, but lots of different possibilities people looking at. And the great thing is Bruce was showing us that we can add each little extensibility as a package and keep adding them on. So as you add a package, you can see how that works and build out your extensibilities within Costpoint 7. So let's now turn to what other resources are available to you. So as you're looking at your Costpoint 7, we do have the Costpoint 7 blog, where we've had blogs on, both from Bruce and me, on extensibility, but we've also done on 701. We've talked about upgrades. We've talked about BERT. So as you're looking for a resource, this is a free resource available to you, so I encourage you to take advantage of it. When you have questions about Costpoint 7 and extensibility, please take a look here. We also have training classes available at NeoSystems. These include Introduction to Costpoint 7. We also have projects in Deltek Costpoint 7. We also have a class on indirect pools and rates in Costpoint 7. Just to be clear, these are all pre-approved CPE classes. So if you're looking for that, or you know someone who needs those CPE credits and also could benefit, we found a lot of people, as they upgrade to Costpoint 7, to fully utilize it, to get all that productivity out of it, these classes are turning out to be a big benefit to them. So now I'm going to open it up to your questions. And so if you have questions, please enter them into the question box. And one of the, oh gosh, they're flying in. Hey, Bruce, one of the questions I have here is, you mentioned briefly the Deltek connector. Where does that fit in? What does it do? How is that different than extensibility? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. The Deltek connector is the fabric, if you will, that can be wrapped around Costpoint. Extensibilities are changing the way Costpoint works. The connector allows you to be able to call those functions within Costpoint as we build these web integration methods. Okay, and the nice thing about the web integration methods, it's tied to the extensibilities. So as you add extensibilities, they are also visible to the web integration piece. So when you start changing Costpoint and adding additional fields, all those fields will also be available to the web service, and so it makes it a lot simpler to tie together. The Deltek connector will be that tool that will actually call the web service, could handle the emails, can handle getting the data from big System X, is their System X at SAP, and moving it into Costpoint, or Costpoint's data, moving it out. So it's the fabric that ties all of these together. It's a set of tools that's been, it's bi-pervasive, and it just has a lot of tools for file manipulation, secured FTP, web service processing, and allows us to do database calls, database processes in a controlled fashion where we can get notifications out if you have an alert system or emails to whoever's in charge.
Okay, great. We're getting the typical question. I should have preempted that. Our intent is to make a recording of this presentation available to all of our attendees today. And we're getting some about licensing for extensibility. Bruce, is that an area where we can comment on, or is that something that we're better off referring people back to Deltek?
I believe it's there with 7. Okay, so with 7 there was no license, right? But again, it was only available to folks that were working with Deltek directly, partners and employees. With 701, there is a license, but again, I think we should defer to Deltek as to, the licensing aspect of it. But there is a license for it now in 7.01.
Okay.
But you should refer to Deltek.
Very good. Does Eclipse come with the 701, or is that separate software?
It is a separate software, but it's a freeware. Again, like most of the Java tool sets, it's a freeware that you can download. You just have to go to Eclipse and then download the version of Eclipse that's not needed. And again, it's a freeware. So it's not the latest one. I don't have the number on top of my head right now, which one it is, but we'll actually post that in a blog as to what the version of Eclipse that you have to use. But it is a free download that you can do. It's free software.
Okay. And is there any difference in SQL versus Oracle platforms?
There is not, other than the standard differences. There's different query differences and different table structure differences, but other than that, no. You could do this process in SQL Server or in Oracle, just like you can have your Costpoint in either SQL Server or Oracle.
Here's one. Can emails being sent be actionable? Your input data and is used to update records. You mentioned the email and the Outlook integration before. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. Basically, if you have a system that ties into your SMTP server that can make it actionable, yes. But basically, the way this process works, it's going to be sending the email to the person. It could have, again, because Costpoint 7 is in a web service, it could be a hyperlink to it so that they can log in on Costpoint and take some action. But there's no way to actually build functionality into the email that says that unless your email service actually has that. Basically, you're mailing an email. Yeah.
Very good. And are the extensibility tables reportable in Cognos 10?
They are if you add them to the framework. If you add them to the Cognos framework, they will be reportable. Again, just like you originally set up your Costpoint Cognos framework, all the tables came in, and as you wanted additional tables, you needed to go ahead and add them to the framework. If they're added to the framework, they can be reported upon, yes.
Okay. Question, I want to be able to query Costpoint products from outside, say using a PHP web application. Can that be done, and are there resources that can help me to do that?
The answer is yes to your question. That would be through either the Deltek connector or directly through a web service that you would build. And yes, there are resources. We have done that in the past, or I have done it in the past, and I'm certainly got other resources that have done it.
Okay. We have a few more questions, but a lot of them seem might be better off handled directly offline. So with that, we're coming up on the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody for their participation today. And if you have any additional questions for either Bruce or myself, feel free to email us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you from NeoSystems.
Thank you very much.